So today I want to talk about endangered wolves. So I thought I would start with a question. By raise of hand, how many people here have a dog or know someone who has a dog? Okay, so almost everybody. I don't know how many of you know this, but we have wolves to thank for man's best friend. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, a hungry wolf approached a fire and was rewarded with a scrap of meat. Ever since then, our histories have been intertwined. And yet, the wolf was almost completely wiped out. In the early 1920s, the government introduced a bounty to hunt wolves because ranchers thought that they were too abundant. Well, that kind of backfired, and because everyone went overboard. Now they're on the endangered species list. So this is a topic I could go on about all day, but since we only have 8 minutes, I'm just going to talk to you about 4 key things. First of all, wolves are a keystone species, meaning they are vital in every ecosystem they exist in. Second, I'll tell you about a white wolf sanctuary I visited over the summer in Oregon. Thirdly, the wolf-livestock conflict, which is the biggest issue in wolf conservation. And lastly, I'll tell you about the Shasta and Lasso Pack, which are the first 2 wolf packs to come back to California in over 150 years. So this image pretty much just tells you how vital wolves are. So in Yellowstone, when they were reintroduced in 1995, they completely changed the ecosystem. In their absence, for example, the elk numbers exploded. And because their numbers exploded, other species suffered. So of course, first they killed some of the elk. But because some of the elk started to get killed, they started to move to areas where it was harder for the wolves to hunt them. So the meadows started to grow back almost instantly because they were no longer grazing near the riverbanks. Trees and forests just exploded into huge willows and trees of aspen. And because of this, the beavers came back. Now beavers are ecosystem builders. So then other animals came back like fish, birds, amphibians, and so forth. Because they came back, other species came back. The wolves also hunted coyotes, and they killed off some coyotes. Now because there's less coyotes, species like antelope and mice and foxes, they started to come back. But scavengers also came back too, in more numbers. They ate off of the carcasses left over by the wolves. Bears also came back because now there's berries on the shrubs and the trees for them to eat. And they reinforced the efforts of the wolves and further stabilized the ecosystem. This picture here is a screenshot from the link above. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's on TED Talks. It's about how wolves change the course of rivers. I would highly recommend you to watch it on your own time. This is a screenshot from the beginning of the video, which leads us into our next point about the wolf sanctuary that I visited. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard wolves howl, but it can give you goosebumps. And unfortunately, it's a sound that's probably not going to be around for much longer if history repeats itself, except for maybe on recordings. So, the White Wolf Sanctuary is a kind of like retirement home for older wolves in Oregon. So we visited, and it was a private tour because the other people that booked it didn't show up, which was really cool for us because it was more exclusive. So they had 11 white wolves and 1 timber wolf. They have them in a male and female pair, each on about 1 acre of enclosure land each. Now the reason they only have 2 is because the wolves come from different places, so you can't really put them together unless they were either raised in a pack and they came up together, because they'll fight if you try to put them in with each other. And you have to do a male and female pair because they are social animals. So they cannot be by themselves or they'll become depressed and their overall health will decline. If you guys ever have an opportunity to visit a wolf sanctuary anywhere, like there's one in Julian, I would highly recommend it. It's just a really cool experience. But most of all, it's really cool to learn about wolves themselves. Like when we went, I knew more about conservation than actually the tour guide did. And he knew more about wolves themselves. So we learned from each other. So these wolves come from a lot of different places, which leads us to our next topic, the wolf versus rancher and livestock problem. Now, this has been the biggest pushback issue for wolf conservation everywhere. For example, in Oregon, as soon as their numbers get to a certain level, they're declared no longer endangered in that state, and they're made legal to hunt. So then of course hunters are like, oh, now we can get a trophy animal, and then they hunt them, and then their numbers decline very rapidly, and they're put back on a protection list. And this goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So ranchers, they use public lands as a cheap way to feed their livestock. Then they also expect the government and the public support to kill any native species that do not get along with their livestock. So this means coyotes, wolves, and even horses. They have all been targeted to promote this livestock being fed cheaply. And keep in mind, these are not problem animals. They're just species trying to survive in their natural habitat. But they have been gone for so long that this land has been completely changed by the agriculture companies. So when I was doing my research, I came across an author on wolves on the Canadian border named Michael Wise. He stated that the challenge of wolf recovery is reintegrating an animal within a region that was transformed by industrial agriculture during the carnivore's 60-year absence. I'm going to pause there, because I think that's really powerful. They were gone for over 60 years. Can you even imagine the changes that they have to get reused to after being gone for 60 years? That's a long time for a certain species to be gone. But he later went on to say that ranchers enjoy tax-supported access to over 270 million acres throughout the United States alone. That's a big number. And most of this land is used by privately owned ranchers. They have their own farms and areas that they can feed their livestock off of, but it's cheaper to do it on public lands because they don't have to pay for the food or the grass or anything else. This has been the biggest pushback for wolf recovery, which leads us to our last point, which is the Shasta and Lassen packs. Like I said before, they're the first two wolf packs to come back in over 100 years to California. This is a huge step in wolf recovery. Now, as soon as they were caught on trail cameras, of course, ranchers immediately asked the government to either trap them and move them back to Oregon, or to allow a bounty and kill them. And then, of course, conservationists are saying, hey, there hasn't been wolves in over 150 years in California. Why would you want to kill them? And so that's still the big issue today, is trying to fight for wolf rights, and not only in California, but in just the whole state. So these are pictures from trail cameras. This one to the left is the Shasta pack, and this one to the left is 3 pups from the Lassen pack. Now the Shasta pack did not stay around for long in California, and it is rumored that they were killed somewhere along the border of California and Oregon, because it is illegal to hunt and kill wolves in Oregon. But at least one member of the Shasta pack had to have survived to create the Lassen pack. So a wolf surviving from the Shasta pack survived and found a mate, and so they border around Oregon and California because wolves migrate a lot. They have big territory spans. But I decided to talk to you guys about this today just because I don't think that people know enough about wolf conservation. So I would highly encourage you guys to learn about it on your own time. Thank you.